Former President Biden speaks from beyond. The presidency in an interview with BBC. Anti-Israel activists storm Columbia University's library and get locked in. And the transgender custody bill in Colorado that sparked massive national outrage is almost completely neutered. I'm Tony Kinnett of the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Thursday, May 8th, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. Former President Joe Biden is back in action in an interview with Channel 4 and BBC, talking a little bit about what he is most concerned about with the current Trump administration.
What did you make of those scenes in the Oval Office? President Trump and President Zelensky?
I found it sort of beneath America, the way that took place. And the way we talk about now that, it's the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here? What president ever talks like that? That's not who we are. We're about freedom, democracy, opportunity, not about confiscation.
The former president also answered a couple of questions about his choosing to leave the race or being pushed out of the presidential race. There's a lot of controversy surrounding that stateside, of course, because no one can seem to agree on where the blame rests. Check it out.
I can hear your passion. I can hear your anxiety that the world is changing the way it has. And for a long time you believed, you said, I'm the man who can stop Donald Trump. And you did once. And in the end, you withdrew from that election campaign at the last minute. It's a question lots of people ask you, Mr. President. Did you leave it too late? Should you have withdrawn earlier, given someone else a bigger chance?
I don't think it would have mattered. We left at a time when we had a good candidate. She was fully funded. And what happened was, I had become what we had set out to do. No one thought we could do. And become so successful in our agenda, it was hard to say, no, I'm going to stop now. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation. It's a transition government. But things move so quickly that it made it difficult to walk away, it was a hard decision, but
regrets though?
No, I think it was the right decision. I think that it was just a difficult decision.
In other equally coherent actions, anti-Israel protesters stormed the Columbia University library yesterday afternoon, protesting both the actions of Immigration Customs Enforcement and the actions of the Israeli military announcing that they would be moving in to control the Gaza Strip. 50 minutes later, the New York Police Department showed up and then locked the protesters inside the library, announcing that if any of the masked and keffiyeh-wearing individuals wanted to leave after violating the law and trespassing, then they could show their ID, be marked down by the police, and be allowed to exit. As you might expect, this news was not received in good humor, and a lot of pushing and shoving and screams about hurting people ensued.
Stop!
While pundits on the left were quick to announce on social media that this was entrapment and a scurrilous action by the police, it should be noted that if you break a law in a particular area, you are no longer granted the right of free passage. In fact, it is a duty of the law enforcement agency with jurisdiction over where you've committed the crime to make sure that justice is carried out for that crime. For more on these complex inner workings of U.S. law, check out your local middle school's civics course. And last but not least, Colorado's House Bill 25-1312, originally following a pattern of a California Assembly bill later vetoed by Gavin Newsom, which would have labeled any kind of dead naming or the non-affirmation of a child's transition as child abuse and be counted as a mark to remove custody, and potentially make those who didn't choose to recognize the child's new gender liable for both civil and criminal prosecution. After a major amount of outrage and more than a couple of warnings of lawsuits from groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom, the bill was heavily neutered. This bill, which passed the Colorado House, didn't make it very far through the Senate before it was amended to remove pretty much all of the anti-parental rights language except for a few social statements. We sat down with Greg Baylor, senior counsel over at the Alliance Defending Freedom, to talk about how this bill went from wildly tyrannical to nothing more than a social statement.
The first version of the bill was awful. It did all the things you talked about. The final version of the bill is significantly less bad. Maybe I can fill in some of the details of that.
Please.
The bill was originally introduced at the end of April in the Colorado House of Representatives. And the two most troubling provisions of the bill were the one that had to do with the custody determinations. It basically said if a parent misgenders or, quote, dead names their own child, that this will be a black mark against them in a custody determination.
Now, hold on. What is for those of us who haven't gone through major custody battles, a black mark, how significant is a black mark?
Yeah, I mean, they leave it up to the judge to decide how weighty that could be. And I think it's entirely predictable that a judge would say, look, if you're misgendering or, quote, dead naming your child, I'm not going to award custody to you. You're not affirming your child's gender confusion. I, the judge, consider that to be a bad thing. And they could literally deny, partial custody. They could diminish the amount of time that parent gets to have with the child. So again, it's a matter of judicial discretion, but that discretion means they could essentially completely cut off access to a child in the divorce context. The other bad thing in the original version of the bill that's also not in the final version, and this is the other one that got a lot of attention in the media, was to forbid, again, misgendering and dead naming in, quote, places of public accommodation. Colorado has a law, the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, that forbids discrimination in places of public accommodation. It already includes sexual orientation, gender identity as protected characteristics. And that, in fact, that is the law that was involved in the Jack Phillips Masterpiece Cake Shop case and in the Lori Smith 303 Creative case, both of which ADF clients went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court slapped down Colorado for misusing that law. And the original proposal would make that law worse by explicitly forbidding misgendering and dead naming in places of public accommodation. The good news is that piece is out in the final version.
Okay, so what in the bill left then that's now heading from the Senate to Governor Jared Polis' desk? What is left that is worth, I don't want to say kicking up a fuss about, because that sounds rather, petty. What is left that severely infringes on the rights of Colorado parents, for example?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything left in the bill that severely infringes on the rights of Colorado parents. I mean, it's an amazing kind of step back by the proponents of this bill. I think they recognized that they overreached. I think they confronted a public response that was unprecedented. Over 700 people signed up to testify against this bill.
Before you go, head down to the description to make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnett Cast. And join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we sit down to talk to Jim Paff of the Conservative Caucus to discuss what comes next for the Catholic Church now that the conclave is in session. They are voting on a new pope, and what it's going to take for the Republican-held Congress to do, its job. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.